They laughed when they told Sebastian Voltaire he belonged in a car instead of a mansion. Minutes later, a single lawyer walked in with evidence that would destroy one of the most trusted men in the country. What looked like a public disgrace was actually the beginning of a massive conspiracy. Subscribe now and discover how the truth turned the hunter into the hunted. I'm Sebastian Voltaire, and the strangest thing about the worst day of my life wasn't the accusation itself. It was how prepared everyone seemed to believe it. Looking back now, every conversation, every suspicious glance, and every perfectly timed headline feels connected. At the time though, I believed I was simply attending another charity gala where successful business leaders donated money, exchanged polite conversations, and went home. I had no idea that before the night ended, millions of people would know my name for all the wrong reasons. 3 years earlier, my life looked completely different. I wasn't appearing on magazine covers or speaking at technology conferences. I spent most of my time inside a modest office filled with computer servers, half-disassembled laptops, and whiteboards covered with security diagrams. I built my cybersecurity company one client at a time, solving problems that larger firms ignored because they weren't profitable enough. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work. Every contract I signed came from recommendations, not expensive advertising campaigns. Slowly, the company expanded. We hired talented engineers, opened offices in 2 cities, and developed encryption software that attracted attention from investors all over the country. More importantly, we earned something money couldn't buy: trust. 6 months before the gala, several investment groups approached me with offers to acquire my company. Their proposals looked generous on paper, but every contract contained conditions that would eventually remove me from control of the technology my team had spent years developing. I refused every offer. Some people thought I was stubborn. Others assumed I was negotiating for a higher price. Neither was true. I simply believed that certain inventions shouldn't become tools for corporations interested only in short-term profit. After the final rejection, the phone calls stopped. The emails disappeared. I assumed everyone had moved on. I was wrong. The charity gala took place inside the Grand Meridian Hotel, one of the most expensive venues in the city. Crystal chandeliers illuminated the enormous ballroom while journalists moved between tables searching for famous faces. Business executives, celebrities, politicians, and television personalities filled the room. Conversations blended together with soft music and the sound of cameras constantly capturing photographs. I had attended similar events before, so nothing felt unusual. Several entrepreneurs congratulated me on our company's recent expansion. Investors asked whether I planned to release a new security platform before the end of the year. Everything seemed perfectly ordinary. Then I noticed Draven Kessler. Almost everyone recognized him immediately. He was one of the country's most respected television consumer advocates, famous for exposing financial fraud and corrupt businesses. Millions watched his weekly investigations. Politicians praised him. Journalists quoted him. Ordinary families trusted him because he always appeared calm, intelligent, and completely fearless when confronting powerful people. We had never spoken before that evening. Still, he crossed the ballroom with remarkable confidence, as if he had been waiting for the exact moment to approach me. He smiled politely while extending his hand. "Mr. Voltaire," he said, "I've heard quite a lot about your company." "The feeling is mutual," I replied. "Your investigations have quite a reputation." His smile never changed. "I hope your reputation survives the evening." Before I could ask what he meant, the lights dimmed throughout the ballroom. The event host welcomed everyone onto the stage and introduced Draven as the night's keynote speaker. The audience applauded enthusiastically while I returned to my table, assuming his strange comment had simply been an awkward attempt at humor. I couldn't have been more mistaken. 20 minutes later, Draven stood beneath the bright stage lights delivering an emotional speech about honesty, accountability, and protecting ordinary citizens from corporate deception. The audience responded exactly as expected. They applauded every dramatic pause and nodded whenever he spoke about integrity. Then, without warning, he looked directly toward my table. His voice became louder. "You should be living out of your car, not in a mansion." Every conversation inside the ballroom stopped. Every camera turned toward me. And before I could even stand, the enormous screen behind him lit up with documents carrying my name. The silence lasted only a heartbeat before the ballroom erupted into whispers. Hundreds of eyes shifted between Draven Kessler and me, waiting to see who would speak first. I remained seated. Panic would only make me look guilty, and whoever orchestrated the spectacle was counting on exactly that reaction. Behind Draven, the giant screen displayed page after page of what appeared to be internal company records. My company's logo sat neatly at the top of each document. There were spreadsheets, customer files, financial statements, and supposed email exchanges discussing identity theft and illegal data sales. To anyone seeing them for the first time, they looked authentic. The formatting matched our corporate templates almost perfectly. Draven raised one sheet of paper high enough for every camera to capture it. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "these documents reveal that Sebastian Voltier built his fortune by exploiting the private information of thousands of innocent people. While hard-working families trusted his technology, he secretly profited from their identities." Gasps spread through the room. Several people I had spoken with only minutes earlier quietly stepped away from my table. One executive avoided making eye contact entirely. Another slipped his phone from his pocket and began typing, probably canceling tomorrow's meeting before the evening had even ended. I slowly stood. "I've never seen those documents before," I said calmly. "They're fabricated." Draven tilted his head as though he expected that answer. "Of course you would say that." The audience laughed. That reaction told me everything. This wasn't an investigation. It was a performance, and every line had already been written. Reporters rushed closer to the stage. Camera flashes exploded across the ballroom while journalists shouted questions from every direction. "Mr. Voltier, how long has this been happening? Did your employees know? Will you resign?" I answered none of them. Instead, I looked carefully at the projected documents. Something felt wrong beyond the obvious accusations. Whoever created them had copied our logo accurately, duplicated our formatting, and even matched the fonts we used internally. Yet one tiny detail immediately caught my attention: the document identification numbers. Every legitimate file generated by our internal system contained randomized security strings that could never repeat. The numbers shown on the screen followed a simple sequence. It looked convincing to outsiders, but any employee inside my company would recognize the mistake instantly. Someone had imitated our paperwork without understanding how it was actually created. That realization kept me unexpectedly calm. If there was one mistake, there would be others. The gala ended in complete chaos. I left through a side exit with 2 members of my executive team while television crews gathered outside the main entrance. Even there, reporters were already broadcasting live. One microphone nearly struck my shoulder. "Sebastian, did you steal customer identities?" I ignored every question and entered my vehicle. During the drive home, my phone became almost impossible to use. Hundreds of notifications flooded the screen. Investors demanded emergency meetings. Clients requested explanations. Friends texted asking whether the news was true. Several unknown numbers left threatening voicemail messages before midnight. By the time I reached my house, helicopters circled overhead. News vans lined both sides of the street. Neighbors watched quietly from their windows as photographers aimed cameras toward my front gate. The headlines spread faster than I imagined possible. Cybersecurity CEO exposed. Luxury built on stolen lives? Exclusive documents reveal massive fraud. Every network repeated the same accusations almost word for word. Someone had distributed identical information to every major newsroom before Draven stepped onto that stage. This attack had been coordinated with military precision. I barely slept that night. Just after sunrise, I stood inside my office overlooking the front entrance as reporters continued waiting outside in the rain. Some looked exhausted after remaining there all night. At exactly 9 o'clock, my attorney, Malcolm Ashford, arrived carrying a sealed brown envelope instead of his usual leather briefcase. He closed the office door behind him without saying a word. Only after checking the windows did he place the envelope on my desk. His expression was unlike anything I had ever seen. "I received this from an anonymous courier an hour ago," he said quietly. "What is it?" "I don't know yet." He slid the envelope toward me. "But whoever sent it believes last night's disaster was planned much earlier than either of us realizes." I stared at the sealed envelope for several seconds before opening it. There was no return address, no handwritten note, and no indication of who had delivered it to Malcolm Ashford's office. The only marking was a small black circle stamped onto the back flap. It meant nothing to either of us. Inside were several printed documents, each organized neatly in chronological order. At first glance, they appeared unrelated to the accusations made against me the previous evening. They weren't financial records or legal filings. They were television production schedules. Malcolm adjusted his glasses while examining the first page. "These belong to Draven Kessler's network," he said. "They're internal planning documents." Every page carried dates from nearly 4 months earlier. One production meeting after another referenced a special investigative episode using nothing more than a codename, Project Granite. The title itself revealed nothing. What caught my attention was a single handwritten note beside one meeting. "Final target approval pending." I frowned. "Target?" Malcolm nodded slowly. Apparently someone had already selected who they intended to investigate. We continued reading. Another schedule listed interviews with cybersecurity experts, former employees, financial analysts, and anonymous whistleblowers. Yet something looked strange. Every witness listed on the earliest schedule had their names crossed out with thick black marker. Beside each crossed-out name, another had been written later in different handwriting. It was as if the original story had been rewritten from beginning to end. "The replacements don't make sense," Malcolm muttered. "What do you mean?" "These people have completely different backgrounds. They're not substitutes. They're entirely different witnesses." That meant one thing. Whatever investigation Draven originally planned wasn't about me. Somewhere along the way, someone changed the target. Malcolm leaned back in his chair. "If these documents are genuine, then the story broadcast last night wasn't developed naturally. Someone redirected the investigation. That possibility changed everything. Instead of asking whether the accusations were false, we needed to discover why they had suddenly been aimed at me. There was only one person I trusted to answer questions involving altered digital records. Her name was Leora Vance. I first met Leora years earlier during a corporate espionage case involving stolen software patents. She had an unusual talent for recovering deleted files that everyone else considered permanently lost. Government agencies occasionally hired her, but she preferred working independently, claiming large organizations often buried inconvenient truths. By late afternoon she arrived at my office carrying nothing more than a backpack and a silver laptop covered in faded security conference stickers. She greeted Malcolm politely before turning toward me. "You sound calmer than someone whose reputation exploded overnight." "I noticed mistakes," I replied. She smiled slightly. "Good. Guilty people usually notice excuses. Innocent people notice details." Within an hour she began analyzing the metadata embedded inside scanned copies of the television schedules. Most people focused on what documents said. Leora focused on when they had changed. As lines of data filled her screen, she stopped typing. "Interesting." Malcolm looked up immediately. "What did you find?" "These files weren't created once." She opened a timeline displaying multiple revision dates. The earliest production schedule was saved 4 months ago. Then someone modified it 3 weeks later. Then again 2 weeks after that. Then 3 more revisions occurred just days before the gala. I leaned closer. Can you tell what changed? Not completely. She highlighted hidden revision markers invisible on ordinary printouts. But I can tell entire sections were deleted and replaced. She recovered fragments from one earlier version. The recovered text didn't mention Sebastian Voltaire. It mentioned an international appliance manufacturer under investigation for consumer fraud. My name appeared nowhere. Someone had erased the original target and inserted me instead. The room fell silent. This wasn't a reporter discovering evidence. This wasn't a whistleblower exposing corruption. Someone had deliberately hijacked an existing investigation and rebuilt it around my identity. Then Leora opened one final recovered metadata log. Her expression changed instantly. There it is, she whispered. What? She turned the laptop toward us. The final revision had been uploaded using a secure network registered not to the television studio, but to a private luxury resort nearly 300 miles from the city. The location surprised all 3 of us. The final revision to the investigation files hadn't been uploaded from Draven Kessler's television studio, his office, or even his home. According to the metadata Leora recovered, the last edits came from a secure network registered to a private luxury resort called Blackwater Cove, a place reserved almost exclusively for corporate retreats, exclusive investment conferences, and invitation-only gatherings. Malcolm frowned. Why would a television investigation be rewritten from a resort? Leora closed her laptop halfway. Because whoever made the changes didn't want them connected to the network. It was a reasonable conclusion. Public television stations maintained strict digital security. Every login left records. Every file transfer created an audit trail. A remote private network offered something far more valuable to anyone planning deception: distance. 48 hours later, we drove to Blackwater Cove. The resort overlooked a rugged stretch of coastline far from the city. Expensive villas surrounded a central conference building, while private security officers quietly monitored every entrance. Luxury cars filled the parking areas despite there being no public event advertised anywhere. We checked in under our real names. There was no reason to hide. If someone wanted to watch me, I intended to let them. Almost immediately, I noticed something unusual. Nearly every guest wore conference badges without company logos. Instead of displaying business names, each badge carried only numbers. No branding. No affiliations. Just identification codes. It felt less like a corporate retreat and more like a meeting designed to conceal who was actually attending. Leora quietly photographed several badges while pretending to answer messages on her phone. Malcolm wandered toward the reception desk, making casual conversation with an employee about upcoming conferences. I chose the hotel lounge overlooking the ocean. Within minutes, I recognized 2 men seated near the windows. Months earlier they had represented different investment groups trying to purchase my company. At the time they claimed they had never worked together. Now they were sharing coffee. That wasn't a coincidence. I pretended not to notice them while listening carefully. One sentence drifted across the room. Once the valuation drops, negotiations become much easier. The second man nodded. No one buys at full price when panic does the discounting. I didn't interrupt. Those words stayed with me. My ruined reputation wasn't the objective. It was merely the method. If enough clients abandoned my company, investors would assume our future profits had collapsed. Stock analysts would downgrade projected value. Banks would hesitate to finance expansion. Eventually, I might have no choice but to sell. Not because my technology failed. Because public trust had been deliberately destroyed. That afternoon, Leora located another unexpected clue. The resort's digital guest directory had accidentally synchronized with an unsecured printer inside the business center. While waiting for Malcolm, she noticed several discarded pages left in a recycling bin. Most contained ordinary reservation confirmations. One page stood out. It listed a private meeting scheduled the same evening inside Conference Room 7. The meeting title was only 3 words: Strategic Reputation Management. No company names appeared. Only attendee numbers. One attendee number matched the badge worn by one of the investors I had recognized earlier. Another matched the second investor. The final number belonged to someone whose identity wasn't listed anywhere in the directory. We needed proof before confronting anyone. That evening, Malcolm requested copies of publicly available corporate registrations, while Leora continued tracing digital activity connected to the resort's network. Just before midnight, she rushed into my room carrying her laptop. I found recurring encrypted communications. Between who? The resort's private server and Draven Kessler's production office. My heartbeat slowed instead of racing. Everything was beginning to fit together. Television broadcasts, investment groups, secret meetings, coordinated document revisions. This wasn't a journalist exposing corruption. It was a business strategy. Then another notification appeared on Leora's screen. An employee inside Draven's organization had just requested an encrypted meeting through an anonymous secure channel. The message contained only one sentence. I have evidence, but if they know I contacted you, I'll disappear professionally before sunrise. The anonymous message arrived at 12:17 a.m. There was no name attached, no email address, and no phone number. Leora examined the encryption signature before speaking. They know what they're doing, she said. This wasn't sent by an amateur. Malcolm folded his arms. Could be a trap. It could, I replied. But if someone inside Draven's organization is willing to risk everything, we have to hear them. The sender proposed a meeting the following afternoon at an old botanical conservatory on the edge of the city. It had been closed for renovations for nearly a year, leaving only a small cafe operating beside the parking lot. Public enough to discourage violence, quiet enough for a confidential conversation. We arrived 30 minutes early. Leora positioned herself where she could observe both entrances. Malcolm remained inside the cafe with a clear view of the parking area while I waited near the conservatory's main gate. At exactly 2 o'clock, a woman stepped out of a gray sedan. She wore ordinary business clothing, sunglasses, and carried nothing except a slim leather folder. She approached slowly before removing her sunglasses. "My name is Nerissa Hale," she said quietly. "I've worked for Draven Kessler for 8 years." She looked exhausted. Not physically, emotionally. The kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying a secret too long. "I don't have much time," she continued. "If anyone followed me here, my career is finished." I nodded toward a nearby bench. "Tell us everything." Nerissa placed the leather folder on the bench between us but didn't open it immediately. "You think Draven wanted to destroy you because he hated you?" I shook my head. "I don't think that anymore." "Good," she replied. "Because he barely knew you." She finally opened the folder. Inside was a portable solid-state drive, several printed meeting schedules, and handwritten notes bearing Draven's initials. "The investigation wasn't created to expose a crime," she explained. "It was commissioned." Malcolm leaned forward. "Commissioned by whom?" "I don't know every name," Nerissa admitted. "The instructions never came directly from investors. Everything passed through consulting firms and legal intermediaries. The people financing it stayed invisible." Leora immediately connected the drive to a protected forensic laptop she had brought specifically for this meeting. Within seconds, dozens of folders appeared. Video rehearsals, draft television scripts, internal emails, private voice recordings. Every file was dated weeks before the charity gala. One video immediately caught my attention. It showed Draven standing alone inside an empty television studio practicing the speech he had delivered during the gala. He paused repeatedly while reading from a teleprompter. Then he looked directly toward the rehearsal camera. "You should be living out of your car, not in a mansion." He stopped, smiled. then repeated the sentence with a different tone, again and again, until it sounded perfectly natural. My stomach tightened. The most shocking moment of my life had been rehearsed like a stage performance. Nothing about that evening had been spontaneous. Nerissa opened another folder. This is worse. The recordings captured strategy meetings involving producers discussing how quickly negative headlines would spread after the live accusation. One producer estimated that sponsors would begin withdrawing within 24 hours. Another predicted banks would delay lending to my company. Someone else suggested releasing additional fabricated documents if public sympathy started shifting back toward me. Every possible reaction had already been anticipated. This wasn't investigative journalism. It was operational planning. Nerissa lowered her voice. They've done this before. The words hung in the air. What do you mean? I asked. There were other companies. Smaller ones. Businesses that couldn't afford lawyers or forensic experts. Most surrendered. Some sold their assets. Others declared bankruptcy. Silence followed. For the first time, I realized my case wasn't unique. It was simply the first time someone had gathered enough evidence to expose the entire system. As we prepared to leave, Nerissa stopped Malcolm. There's one more thing. She handed him a sealed envelope separate from everything else. It contains tomorrow's production schedule. Malcolm opened it carefully. His expression changed immediately. Draven wasn't preparing another broadcast. He was preparing a televised special celebrating his investigation as the greatest consumer fraud exposure of the decade. He had no idea that before those cameras rolled, federal investigators would already be waiting for him. I barely slept the night before Draven's scheduled broadcast. Not because I feared what he might say next, but because everything had finally reached the point where evidence mattered more than accusations. For days my name had dominated headlines, my company had lost clients, and strangers had judged me without asking a single question. Now the truth was about to begin its own journey. Just after sunrise, Malcolm received confirmation from federal investigators that every piece of evidence provided by Nerissa had been verified. The digital signatures matched. The financial records aligned with encrypted communications recovered by Leora. Production schedules corresponded precisely with investor meetings held at Blackwater Cove. Nothing existed in isolation anymore. Every document supported another. At 10 o'clock we gathered inside a federal office to provide final statements. Investigators explained that the case had expanded far beyond fabricated documents targeting me. They had uncovered years of undisclosed consulting agreements disguised as charitable partnerships. Several investment groups had secretly paid intermediaries to coordinate media campaigns designed to destroy public confidence in selected companies before attempting to purchase them at dramatically reduced values. I listened in silence. What had happened to me wasn't personal revenge. It was a business model. By early afternoon, television networks promoted Draven's live special with dramatic advertisements declaring that new revelations would expose one of the largest technology frauds in recent history. Millions prepared to watch. So did federal agents. The studio audience applauded as Draven stepped onto the brightly lit stage wearing the same confident smile the public had trusted for years. He welcomed viewers. He thanked producers. He praised investigative journalism. Then everything stopped. The main studio doors opened. Several federal agents entered calmly, displaying official credentials before approaching the stage. At first, many audience members assumed it was part of the program. Even Draven smiled politely. That smile disappeared when the lead investigator quietly informed him he was being detained pending charges related to conspiracy, wire fraud, obstruction of justice, and coordinated market manipulation. The cameras kept rolling. No producer reacted quickly enough to cut the live feed. Millions watched in complete disbelief as the man who built his reputation exposing dishonesty was escorted away under federal investigation. The following weeks brought revelations no one expected. Court-authorized searches uncovered additional servers containing years of internal planning documents. Former producers accepted plea agreements in exchange for testimony. Financial consultants admitted that reputation attacks had been treated as investment strategies. Several executives resigned before formal charges reached them. One by one, the people responsible abandoned one another. No one wanted to be the last person protecting a collapsing lie. 3 months later, the court formally cleared my name of every accusation. Independent forensic experts demonstrated exactly how fabricated documents had been created and distributed. Every major news organization that repeated the false claims issued public corrections. Some apologized privately. Others apologized on national television. The damage to my reputation had been severe, but the truth arrived with something stronger than sympathy. It arrived with proof. My company slowly regained lost clients. Several businesses that had canceled contracts returned after reviewing the court's findings. Employees who had stood beside me through the crisis remained with the company, and together we rebuilt what others had tried to destroy. When the civil cases concluded, I received a substantial financial settlement from multiple parties involved in the conspiracy. People expected me to buy larger houses, more expensive cars, or celebrate publicly. Instead, I established an independent non-profit organization dedicated to helping victims of digital defamation, fabricated evidence, and coordinated online smear campaigns obtain forensic assistance they could never otherwise afford. No one should lose a lifetime of work because powerful people can manufacture convincing lies. As for Draven Kessler, prison was only part of his punishment. His career had depended entirely on credibility. Once the recordings, rehearsals, and secret agreements became public, that credibility disappeared forever. Networks erased his programs from future schedules. Sponsors canceled every remaining contract. Publishers withdrew upcoming projects. The audience that once trusted every word he spoke no longer believed anything he said. In the end, the mansion was never the real issue. Neither was my company. The real battle was between appearance and evidence. People often believe the loudest voice in the room because certainty is easier than investigation. But facts have remarkable patience. They wait quietly until someone is willing to uncover them. I'm Sebastian Voltier, and if my story proves anything, it's that truth doesn't always arrive first, but when it finally does, even the most carefully rehearsed lie cannot survive. Thank you for following this journey from beginning to end. If you enjoyed this story of suspense, betrayal, and justice, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next original story filled with unexpected twists.